It was a Sunday morning like any other in Houston. The clouds were thick but peaceful, hovering above the city like gentle reminders of grace. At Lakewood Church, the usual hum of volunteers and early attendees filled the vast lobby as the automatic glass doors welcomed them in. Familiar greetings, the rustle of Bibles, and the echo of heels on tile harmonized like a modern-day hymn. But this morning, something unexpected happened. Joel Osteen, dressed in his usual calm blue suit, approached the church from the private staff entrance, the same entrance he had walked through for nearly 2 decades. But today the security scanner didn't beep, the automatic doors didn't open. Instead, a uniformed security guard, someone he didn't recognize, stepped in front of him. "I'm sorry, sir, you can't enter this way today." Joel blinked, momentarily unsure if it was some sort of prank. "Excuse me?" The guard didn't flinch. "Orders from administration. No one uses this door until further notice." "But I'm Joel," he said, half smiling. "Joel Osteen." "I know who you are," the guard said, his voice not rude but not warm either. "Still, you'll need to enter through the main entrance like everyone else." Something tightened in Joel's chest, not anger, not fear, but a strange stillness. He nodded slowly, stepping back without protest. No questions, no argument. He simply turned toward the front. At the main entrance, a small crowd had gathered. When they saw him, whispers passed like a breeze through the congregation. "Why is he coming through here? Did something happen? Is he okay?" Joel offered a gentle smile and shook hands as he entered. But inside, he carried the quiet weight of the moment. It wasn't embarrassing, it wasn't pride. It was something else, something that he couldn't name just yet. As he reached the auditorium, he took his seat near the front, not on the stage. And for the first time in years, he listened to the opening worship not as a pastor, but as just another soul in the crowd. He closed his eyes. He didn't know it yet, but this was the beginning of something bigger. Not a scandal, not a fall from grace, but a question. One that would stir old memories, test old beliefs, and change the way he saw everything, and perhaps change the way others saw him too. If you're feeling something already, if this moment has caught your heart like it did Joel's, make sure to subscribe to the channel. This story is just beginning, and where it leads might surprise you. After the final worship song faded and the lights dimmed for the start of the message, Joel remained seated in the pew, hands clasped, eyes forward. Another pastor, Mark Ellison, a humble man who had quietly served on the team for years, stepped up to the pulpit. He preached with conviction, but Joel found himself only half hearing the words. His thoughts wandered. What had just happened? Who had issued the order? Why now? Joel wasn't the kind of man to jump to conclusions, but the feeling gnawed at him. Still, he knew better than to confront anyone in haste. So he waited, listened, watched. After the service, Joel rose and quietly made his way to the back of the church, where he used to greet members decades ago when Lakewood was still meeting in a modest building. Some older congregants spotted him and smiled. "Pastor Joel, you're back here with us common folks today," said Ruth Carter, a retired teacher in her late 70s who had been attending since the days of his father, John Osteen. Joel chuckled, softly. "I guess I needed the reminder of where I came from." Ruth patted his hand. "You never left us. Even when you were up there, you were still one of us." Her words touched him more deeply than he let on. As people began to exit, Joel walked out the main doors for the first time in years, pausing in the parking lot to look up at the vast glass front of the church. The same building he had overseen, expanded, prayed over. But today it felt different, as if he was seeing it from the outside for the first time. Just then, a man in a denim jacket and worn boots approached. "You're Joel Osteen, right?" Joel turned. "Yes, I am." The man nodded slowly. "Didn't expect to see you outside." Joel smiled gently. "Didn't expect to be outside." There was a long pause. "I used to come here," the man said. "Before my wife got sick. Before I lost everything. Stopped coming when I figured no one would notice." Joel looked him in the eye. "But I noticed now." The man's lip trembled slightly. He nodded, then walked away without another word. Joel stood still, the wind rustling his suit jacket. That brief encounter, just a few words, had reached a place he hadn't visited in years, and somewhere inside, a door creaked open. A door he didn't know had been closed. Monday mornings at Lakewood Church usually began with stillness. The early light filtered in through the high windows of the offices, and the hum of the air conditioning accompanied the first steps of the staff as they prepared for the week. Joel arrived just before 8 a.m., as he always did, coffee in hand, Bible under his arm, but this time there was a small envelope taped to his office door. It was plain, no name, no handwriting, just white, sealed. Joel paused, then peeled it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed. All staff and leadership personnel must enter through the front entrance until further notice. This is a decision made to reinforce our shared humility and accessibility. No exceptions. It was unsigned. Joel sat in his chair staring at the paper. He wasn't angry, but he was puzzled. It didn't sound like something their leadership team would implement without conversation. And certainly not without his input. He called his assistant, Mallory, a quiet and capable woman who had worked with him for almost 10 years. "Did you hear about this new entrance policy?" he asked. Mallory hesitated. "Yes, sir. I thought you approved it." "I didn't," Joel said slowly. "And it seems like no one's claiming responsibility for it either." "I can check around," she offered. "No," Joel said. "Let's leave it for now. I want to see where this goes." That afternoon, Joel chose to walk through the children's wing. He hadn't visited it in a long while, not since the renovations. He passed by classrooms full of bright colors, heard laughter from volunteers rehearsing worship songs with hand motions, and smiled at a mother calming her toddler near the snack counter. Then he saw a bulletin board near the nursery with dozens of Polaroid pictures, volunteers, families, moments of joy. And there, pinned among the smiling faces, was a faded picture of his father, Pastor John Osteen, shaking hands with a man in a wheelchair in the church's original sanctuary. Joel stopped. He hadn't seen that photo in years. The past had always been with him, but suddenly it was speaking louder than usual. That night he went home and opened the bottom drawer of his desk. Inside was a thin journal, his father's last. Yellowed pages, slanted handwriting, quiet wisdom. And on the first page, "If ever this place forgets the people outside the spotlight, may the spotlight be turned off." Joel closed the book and leaned back, eyes misted. Perhaps that's what this was about. Not a memo, not a mistake, but a message. By Wednesday, quiet curiosity had begun to ripple through Lakewood's staff. Some whispered about the memo. Others speculated about new policies or shifts in leadership, but Joel said nothing. He continued entering through the front doors, greeting people with the same gentle warmth, sitting in the congregation during evening services like anyone else. That morning, he walked into the weekly leadership meeting. The room was bright, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Houston skyline. 10 chairs circled a wide oak table. Every seat was filled, except for the one at the head. Joel usually sat there. Instead, he quietly took a chair along the side, heads turned. A few exchanged glances. Mark Ellison cleared his throat. "Pastor Joel, we weren't sure if you were joining us today." "Of course," Joel said calmly. "Why wouldn't I?" There was a short silence. Then Mark nodded and opened his laptop. "We've got updates on the youth ministry, some questions about outreach budgets, and—" Joel raised a hand gently. "Before we start, I'd like to ask something." Everyone looked up. "Who sent the memo?" he asked, voice steady. "The one about the entrances?" More silence. Mallory looked uncomfortable. Mark looked confused. Then a young staffer, James Ruiz, who had joined the team less than a year ago, cleared his throat. "I wrote it," he said, his voice shaking slightly. Joel nodded. "Thank you for your honesty. Can I ask why?" James swallowed. "I didn't mean to overstep. I've been hearing from volunteers, especially the older ones. Some of them felt distant from leadership, that we were becoming too polished, too untouchable. I thought if we all walked in the same door it might change something. I was going to bring it up in this meeting, but I got ahead of myself." The room was still. Joel looked at James and then at the rest of the team. "You didn't overstep," he said finally. "You stepped forward." James's eyes widened. Joel continued. "My father used to say, a church should smell like its people. Not just the polished parts, but the burdens, the bruises, the stories." He looked around the table. "Maybe we've forgotten that." For the first time in months, the room felt alive, not with noise, but with truth. The following. Sunday morning, Joel arrived early, earlier than he had in years. The air was humid, as Houston mornings often are, and the city still felt quiet, like it hadn't quite woken up yet. He parked far from the entrance on purpose. As he walked toward the church, he passed people he normally didn't see, parking. Volunteers waving with tired smiles, elderly women climbing down from carpool vans, and a young couple sitting on a bench, clearly in the middle of an argument, but still holding hand. He greeted each one. "Morning, friend. Beautiful day, isn't it? I'm glad you're here." Not out of politeness, but because he meant it. Inside, the building filled slowly. Joel didn't go to the green room or check the sermon. Notes waiting for him backstage. He sat in a pew again, same spot, 4th row from the back. The congregation swelled with music and praise. Joel closed his eyes. Then someone tapped his shoulder. He turned to see a man in his late 50s, disheveled, hair hands calloused, holding a sealed white envelope. His clothes were clean but worn. Something about him looked familiar, but Joel couldn't place it. "This is for you," the man said quietly. Joel took the envelope. "Thank you. What's your name?" The man hesitated. "You probably wouldn't." "Remember. But I was here the day your dad gave his last sermon. You prayed with me outside when I was thinking about walking away from everything." Joel blinked. "I remember now. You had a cane." "I don't use it anymore," the man smiled faintly. "Life's been hard, but God's been faithful." Joel nodded slowly. "He always is." The man left without another word. Joel opened the envelope. Inside was a single torn page from a Bible, Isaiah 58. A verse was underlined. "If you spend yourselves in behalf of the hungry and satisfy the needs of the oppressed, then your light will rise in the darkness." Joel read it again and again. He didn't know how the man had found him. He didn't know why that passage, but he knew one thing. The message wasn't from the man. Not really. It was from God, and he was stirring something. That afternoon, after most of the congregation had gone home and the sanctuary lights dimmed to rest, Joel stayed behind. He wandered the halls with no real destination, until he found himself near a door he hadn't opened in over 15 years, the storage basement. Years ago, this space had been used for Sunday school props, donated supplies, folding chairs, and broken speakers that nobody had the heart to throw out. But eventually, as Lakewood grew, the basement was forgotten. Joel pulled out his keyring. The brass key still fit. The air inside was heavy with dust and time. Rows of metal shelves stood like monuments to the past. Boxes were labeled with faded Sharpie: 1999 Women's Retreat, Children's Ministry, 2003 Disaster Relief, Katrina. Joel walked slowly, running his fingers along the boxes as memories brushed against him like whispers. At the far corner, he found a table with an old cassette player and a crate of tapes, his father's sermons recorded week after week before digital ever took hold. He plugged it in. Miraculously, the power light flickered to life. He slid in a tape marked March 17, 1996, and pressed play. John Osteen's voice crackled through the speaker. "Don't build walls with your success. Build tables. Sit down. Listen. Serve. That's what the gospel looks like." Joel sat down, on the cold concrete floor, elbows resting on his knees. He had always believed in his calling, always believed God had gifted him to speak to people's hope. But lately he wondered if they had lost the heart of the message in all the lights and precision. Maybe this moment, this change, wasn't about discipline or humiliation. Maybe it was about redirection, reconnection, reconciliation. He stayed in that basement for hours, listening to one tape after another, his father's words washing over him like old rain. familiar, cleansing, necessary. When he finally emerged, the sun had begun to set. Joel locked the basement door behind him, not to hide what was inside, but to protect it. He didn't know what he was going to do next, but for the first time in years, he knew he needed to listen before he led. By Thursday morning, word had spread. Not gossip, something quieter. A shift. Staff and volunteers at Lakewood began noticing that Joel wasn't in his usual places. He was sitting beside them during morning prayer, eating lunch in the common break room, walking the long back hallways of the church without an assistant at his side. Some didn't know what to make of it. Others said nothing, but smiled a little, more when they passed him. That day, Joel entered the small group leaders training session unannounced. These were the volunteers, the retirees, the single mums, the quiet middle-aged men who worked all week and led home Bible studies in the evenings. The room fell quiet when he walked in. "Don't stop," he said with a gentle smile. I came to sit." He pulled out a plastic chair in the back corner and listened. The speaker, a soft-spoken woman named Denise, continued her talk on hospitality. She'd been leading groups for 12 years. Joel had never heard her teach before. She said something that struck him. Hospitality isn't about inviting people into a perfect space. It's about making space for people where they are. Joel wrote it down. After the session ended, Denise approached him nervously. "I hope I didn't overstep, Pastor." "Not at all," Joel said. "I came here to learn." She blinked. "From us?" "Yes," he said simply. "From you." That evening, Joel walked into the sanctuary long after the last staff had gone home. The room was silent, the stage dark. He sat down in the front row, then got up and walked to the pulpit. Slowly, thoughtfully, he looked out over the rows of empty chairs. What did it mean to lead a church like this, today, now? He thought about the man with the envelope, about Isaiah 58, about the words from his father's sermon, "Build tables." Joel left the stage and walked to the side of the sanctuary, where a single folding chair stood against the wall, likely forgotten. Misplaced, he picked it up and placed it right in the center of the platform. One chair, nothing else. Then he walked away. On Friday morning, Joel did something he hadn't done in over 20 years. He walked to the small diner across the street from the church, the kind of place with cracked leather booths, faded menus, and a waitress who called everyone sweetheart. It had been a favorite of his father's, especially after long Sunday services. When John Osteen needed quiet more than applause, Joel slid into a booth by the window and ordered a black coffee. A few minutes later, the bell above the door jingled. Larry. Jenkins walked in, same as he did every Friday. Larry had been Lakewood's janitor since 1991. He had a limp from an old roofing accident and a voice like gravel. Most people overlooked him. Joel never had. But it had been a long time since they'd really talked. "Joel?" Larry raised his eyebrows. "Have a seat," Joel smiled. "My treat?" Larry eased himself into the booth. "Well now, this is a surprise." They sipped coffee in silence for a few minutes. No rush, no agenda. Then Larry leaned back. "I heard about the door situation." Joel smiled wryly. "Hard to miss," Larry nodded. "You know, your dad used to come in here when he was wrestling with something. Never told me what, just said, 'Larry, when you don't know what to do, sit where the ordinary people sit.' God speaks there." Joel felt that lump rise in his throat again. "That's why I'm here." Larry took a slow sip, then said, "You're listening different now. I can see it." Joel looked out the window, where the church's massive glass facade reflected the morning sun. "I think I got so used to speaking, I forgot what listening felt like." Larry nodded. "Happens to the best of us." They sat for another half hour. Just two men in a booth, surrounded by the hum of old stories and clinking dishes. As Joel stood to leave, Larry grabbed his arm. "One more thing," he said. "That chair you left on stage, don't move it." Joel tilted his head. Larry smiled. "It says more than a sermon ever could." That Sunday, the church filled as usual. Families found their rows, volunteers handed out bulletins, and the worship band rehearsed softly under dim lights. But as service time neared, something felt different. There were no countdown timers on the screen, no bright intro video, no flashing lights, just a single wooden chair, center stage. It was the same folding chair Joel had placed there days earlier. Not polished, not decorative, just plain, ordinary. And it hadn't been moved. People began whispering. The staff noticed, too. A few looked backstage to ask what was going on, but no one seemed to know. Then the lights dimmed further, and a soft acoustic melody began to play. The worship leader, clearly moved, stepped up and spoke into the microphone without preamble. "Before we sing," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "Pastor Joel asked us to start today." In silence. No one moved. No one objected. So they sat. For nearly 2 minutes, the entire sanctuary was still. Hundreds of people, young and old, wealthy and struggling, long-time members and first-timers, breathed in the same quiet. Then Joel stepped on stage. No microphone. He walked slowly to the center, stood beside the chair, and looked out. "You're probably wondering why this is here," he said, gesturing gently toward the seat. "It's not a prop, it's not a metaphor, it's a reminder." He paused. "A reminder that for all our growth and all our reach, we are still a church of people. People who need space to sit, to speak, to be heard." He scanned the room. "This week, I remembered something my father said. If you ever lose sight of the ones no one else sees, you've lost the heart of the gospel." I've been asking myself if I still see them. Joel's voice grew quiet. "And I want to say, if you've ever felt invisible here, I'm sorry. If this place ever felt too big to hold your pain, your questions, your story, I want to say, not anymore." He walked to the chair. "This seat is for you, whoever you are." Then he sat down in it. The congregation didn't clap. They didn't need to. Some wept, others bowed their heads, and somewhere in the back row an old man whispered, "Amen." The next morning Joel arrived early again, but this time something was different in the lobby. Dozens of envelopes were taped to the walls, some in neat rows, others tucked beside framed photos and ministry posters. Because no one should ever sit alone. Joel said nothing about it during the service. He simply sat in the first chair as usual. Then, during the final worship song, he stood and gestured gently toward the second chair, an open invitation. An elderly man walked forward slowly. His hands trembled, but he took the seat. The music continued. No fanfare, no introduction. Just one more person choosing to be seen. And then it happened again the next week, and the week after. Different people. Different stories. One woman had just finished chemo. A young man had lost his brother in a car accident. A couple came forward, holding hands after nearly divorcing. One by one they sat. Not to speak, but to be present. The church didn't clap. They didn't need to. Over time, others began bringing chairs too, quietly, reverently, setting them near the stage or in corners of the sanctuary. By the end of the month, there were nearly a dozen, each one a silent declaration. You belong. The wall of letters kept growing. Joel rarely preached the same way again. His sermons became shorter, simpler, more scripture, more silence, more room for tears. Lakewood had not become less, it had become real, and people came, not for the show, but for the seat. The story reached newspapers, blogs, even national broadcasts. But Joel barely noticed. He no longer checked headlines. His focus had shifted inward, deeper. One evening he sat in the sanctuary, long after the lights had dimmed. The chairs were still there, empty now, but not forgotten. He bowed his head and whispered, "Thank you, Lord, for stopping me at the door, for bringing me back inside." And then, with no camera, no audience, and no sound but the air-conditioning hum, he wept, not for sadness, but because he finally felt home. If this story touched your heart, we invite you to subscribe to the channel for more stories of faith, grace, and real-life transformation. Joel's journey is a reminder to us all, no matter how large the crowd or how lost the moment feels, God still sees the one who sits alone. So pull up a chair. There's always room for one more. Never stop believing. that God can still speak through silence, still heal through honesty, and still love the forgotten ones back to life. Amen.